Hey, what's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 144 of In a Good Way podcast. Today's special guest is Debbie Gleason. Thank you for being here, Debbie. It's an honor. We've had Debbie here before a few times, I think at least three, four times. I'm not sure how many times. So I'll skip all the extra introduction part, right? But Debbie had a profound experience near the end of last year, right? It was last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She attended an ayahuasca ceremony, and I'll touch about something else after, right? But I'm so happy that you had this profound experience because not everybody does, right? I've had people tell me they didn't experience anything. I've read up about things that weren't so pleasant, this and that. So I think with you, it's kind of what everybody hopes for, or that kind of thing, right? So I'll let you share it. I'm gonna give you the floor. That's funny because my clock says 111 right now. I know this that
Ah,
no that number's been appearing like crazy.
love it.
So I feel it like that's and I don't even think it's right? So that's the funny thing. So it's 111 as we're doing this. So that's beautiful. Okay, so I'm gonna let Debbie go ahead and take us through her journey, whatever she's comfortable with sharing. And yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so what you just said about some people not having an experience or they don't kind of have that profound feeling afterwards. I actually had no idea. Like I just assumed going into it that everybody has some type of very positive experience or something shifts. So I really had no idea. Go
No, and
ahead.
yeah, you just reminded me because I'll bring this up after. But
Yeah.
what made you even go do it to begin with? Because that's important. What happened that made you all of a sudden go want to go do it?
Yeah, it's crazy that that week, I think maybe for about 2 weeks, I felt a lot of like inspiration or like something guiding me. I would probably say it was more spiritual or like my soul kind of wanting certain things or experiences. And so the weekend before, I had actually gone to LA for a dance class, and I am not a dancer, but something in me felt like, oh, this is a next level of healing, like to move a certain way and to kind of fight past certain conditioning of like women feeling sexualized or, oh, this is not appropriate because you're a therapist or you're a mom, you know? So, like, something in me was like, I should go do that. That seems like it would be a little uncomfortable, probably out of my scope, and I should do that. It happened to be run by a woman that I follow who's like a fitness person. And so I'd already done some type of coaching thing with her previously, and I really liked her energy. So I went and signed up for that and just like flew out, took this class, came back, and yeah, so it was very inspired. And so in that next week, I had a friend who was living in the Dominican Republic, and he just kept telling me about this and was like, "Are you sure you don't want to come? Like, you should come out here." And he's been telling me about this for some time, and I've heard about his journey and what he works with. I think he does like cacao. He like actually like grinds up the what is it, cocoa bean and stuff. Like he like works with it. So I've heard a lot about it. I've been really happy for him and like seeing him in the experiences. I really like to hear about it, and it's a lot. But I've always just been like, yeah, I would love to come. Yes, yeah, without thinking that I would actually go. It was just, like, yeah, I want $1 million, but is it really going to land in my lap right now? No. So it was like one of those things where I was just like, yeah, I really want to go. I want to go. And I guess maybe I said it enough times that like it just kind of started coming together. And next thing you know, he was like, some people aren't going to make it anymore. There's some spots. Like he was really encouraging this. And I was like, well, I have work. I don't know, I can't just leave like that. I've got the kids and all that. And he's pulling up flights for me and like trying to, where would you fly out of? What would you? So I was like, okay, well, let me look at it. And so I'm looking at it, and it's a lot of money, as we know, cost of things, flights. I mean, it's not, especially the week of, like, it's so expensive. But I had told myself, I said, you know what? Um, if I could find a payment plan for this, like I might consider it because I can't just drop this money like that. And it turned out when I went to click checkout or something, it came up with one of those payment things like Affirm or something. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I should consider it. And this is something I have felt ayahuasca calling to me maybe about 2 years ago. And for whatever reason, I think I felt guilty the amount of money. I remember speaking to my husband at the time about it. And I was like, hey, like, would you support me if I took like a week off to go do this? Like, could you watch the kids? Like, how do you feel about me traveling like that far and all this kind of stuff? And it wasn't really supported at the time financially. Like, he was just like, I don't think that's a good idea for you to drop all that money. And like, what if you don't have a good experience? Or like, it was just a lot of stuff where I was like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I won't go. I'm actually really glad looking back that I didn't go on that particular one because it seemed a little, I hate to use the expression, but like whitewashed. Like the, like it was not, I wouldn't get the full like setting and experience that I feel like I got in this in such a small, like less known group, people that I felt were way more connected to the medicine than I think this other group. And not to say that people doing this other one are not getting a good experience, but for me, I just feel like that isn't really what was supposed to happen for me. But I have been over the past 2 years, I would say, been hearing kind of like this little nudge or whisper from ayahuasca. And I guess I just always assumed like, oh, it'll happen later. It'll happen later. Like I'll like it's nothing. I didn't feel like such a push. But in this time frame, it just felt so guided, like a breeze, like an air. Like,
Mm,
my friend telling me, pulling up the flights. Oh, look, there's a payment plan. Like, this is on a weekend. So technically, like kids will be with dad or whatever, like these little things that I was like, I mean, I could make this work. Um,
mm,
so because of that, I just decided, okay, let's go ahead and do it. And I think the way this happened worked out to my advantage because I didn't have a lot of time to sit with, oh, I'm going on this trip next month. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, like I had planned it 4 months ahead or something, and I'm thinking about it and thinking about it. It's like it just happened. Like I even had just talked to somebody else about how when I got there, like I had no intention, I had no like nothing that I felt like I was carrying that was like a burden of like I need this fixed now. I just kind of went. So yeah, so I was very guided. I didn't even think I was going to make it. Like the connections, the flights were all kind of crazy. And even that was very guided. Like there was even a point where a passenger next to me who only spoke Spanish or like, what they're speaking in the Dominican, um, he pulled out his boarding pass and I could see where the gate was for the next flight. On my boarding pass, for whatever reason, it didn't have it. And so I was going to be wasting time looking for where's the gate at. And he pulled it out and showed me. Like, I guess he like could tell I was like worried. I'm looking at my boarding pass, like, what?
oh wow.
And so he showed me, he like pulled it out, he like pointed and then he like said in like broken English, like, we're gonna have to run. And I was like, yeah. So like a lot of things. So even one of my flights got pushed back 20 minutes. I had like sprinted all the way to another terminal, got there. The plane should have been leaving. I should have
Oh
been
wow.
seeing my flight like go, and it got pushed back 20 minutes. So it
Mm,
was like all these little things. I was like, okay, I'm just like, I'm meant to be going. I'm trusting this. I'm surrendering to what this is. And it was actually a 2 night ceremony. I think it was actually a week, maybe. I don't really know. And that's the other thing too. See, I had no knowledge of the whole scope of it, but I think there were some people there who had stayed for a week and might have done maybe 4 ceremonies in that time frame. What I was told about was the weekend ceremony. And I think it might have fallen under a full moon, if I'm not mistaken.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember.
It was yeah, I think it did actually, now that I think of it. I think that also too kind of was another confirmation for me. I love full moons that I was like,
Mm.
oh, I should go. But uh so there was a 2 night, it was over the weekend, it was a 2 night ceremony, and they recommend you do both. Now, I spoke to the facilitator ahead of time and I let her know, like, hey, I won't be able to make it for that first one just based on like how like the flights were going. It was going to be an all day travel pretty much for me, so I wasn't going to make it. And she seemed kind of hesitant about it at first. And she said she was just going to have to like check in about it. And then she got back to me and she was like, you know what, if you feel called, like come for that one night. And I was like, okay. So I went, and part of me was thinking, I was like, am I cheating myself out of like the full experience and like taking all this time and money to go for half of an experience, or like what if it doesn't work? But I just was like, well, this seems so guided, like there's got to be something in this. And if anything, like I get to see my friend who I haven't seen in forever. So I was okay with it. Like I said, it was a lot of surrender. I was just like, it is what it is. Like, let's go. So yeah, so I get there and I can hear the ceremony going on. And the person who was escorting me to my room, this was at like the middle of the night. It was like, I want to say it was almost 1 o'clock, maybe about 1:30 or something when I got there. And the ceremony is going on. I can hear singing and all this, and the escort was like trying, he almost brought me into the ceremony room, and I'm there with like my duffel bag, and I'm like, no, 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 like there's a lot going on in there, I don't need to go in. And he's like, are you sure you don't want to say hi? And I was like, no, I don't think he knew what was really happening in there. Because he was like part of, like there was like a resort or something. I don't think he really knew what was happening. And so I was like, no, 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 that I'm good. So I went to my room, went to sleep. And even the way the accommodations were set up, I actually got to stay in the quarters with the facilitator and the shaman, the woman who was also kind of leading the whole ceremony. So that in itself, I was like, wow, like this, like almost like why me? Like, whoa.
Mm.
But it was a great experience. And so then the next morning I wake up, you're really supposed to be fasting, they say, or like eating a lot better. And so that was another thing too. Like the moment I had bought the ticket, I like had to just kind of, do what I could as far as eating. So like no fried foods, try to reduce the salt and the sugar, no caffeine. And so that was even startling for me and my body, like to just cut the caffeine. I couldn't believe it. I think I did drink a little bit of tea at one point because I was like, I will pass out. Like this is a lot. But I think technically, and I'm curious how that would have impacted it if I had had more time to actually like cleanse my body from a lot of that stuff. But I did what I could. I fasted on that whole day of travel, and it was actually by accident because I had brought a bag of fruit and I left it in the car. So
Mm.
I was really mad. I was ready for a mango at one point. I was like, I left it in the car. But I think that was done on purpose. It was like you don't need anything in your body. So that actually kind of worked out for me. And so the next morning I'm going to breakfast. It's a lot of clean eating. And there was an integration circle happening that day. I had asked, should I sit in? Should I not? Since I wasn't a part of the group the previous night. And everybody agreed that it was okay for me to listen in. And that in itself, I feel like that is such a different experience. Like, I don't know if anybody else has had that. And I think I had shared with you too that there was one woman, and I felt kind of bad about it, where after the integration, she came up to me and she felt like, I was provided some information or answers that would help me through the ceremony. And she was like, I wish I had gotten that. I
Oh.
feel like I think she even used the word advantage. Like, I feel like you're at an advantage. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I like kind of had to like sit with what I was feeling with that and what I feel like she was feeling as well. But during the integration, a lot of people did share that they were waiting for the visuals. They were waiting for, I think somebody even called it like the movie to play. They were like, I was
Mm.
waiting for the movie to play. I was waiting for the answers. Some people had come from situations, or they might have been dealing with a crisis and they were looking for answers. And so it was interesting for me to hear that like a lot of the group, I would say maybe like 70, 60, 70% was disappointed. They were like, I didn't get it, nothing happened. I think some of them had feelings, like they were like, oh, I felt like euphoric, or I felt a lot of like intense love, like love I've never felt before. But they had no visuals. Some of them reported like crying, um, they felt like an extreme emotion, and they were kind of working through maybe memories or something, but it wasn't like a visual. It was just like, oh, I'm remembering something right now, and it's like making me cry or making me tearful. So it was interesting to hear. There's a piece of this. I'm not going to share it just because I want to keep the tradition and for the facilitator and what she shared. I'm going to skip over that piece, but showed um she showed us something. I won't go into detail. And she kind of described, she tried to give us kind of an indication of like maybe how to work with the medicine. I'll say that I won't use her words or what teaching she provided. But like I said, in that, this other woman felt like me hearing this, I'm like already given like maybe an answer to the test, like as if it was, a test.
Mm.
But I will say, while I was listening to it, a part of me recognized that, hey, me jumping in here at this point, and I didn't experience what people did the night before. I literally just, it was like I came in the middle of a movie. I understood what she was talking about. And I found that really interesting. I was like, I should not understand. Like, I feel like you would have to have that experience and her describe this thing of how to work with it for you to be like, oh, I see what you're saying. But for me, something in me just like, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what you do. Like it was, like I don't know why, but something in me was doing that. And I was like, I wonder if like, I believe in past lives and parallel lives and things like that. And I was like, I wonder if like I've done this before. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, of course you've done it before. And so I was like, maybe that's why when she said it, I was like, yeah, I know this. Like I already know. So I just let it go. Like I didn't think too much into it. I like took the information in and I was like, okay. And we went about our day. We went to the beach and just kind of enjoyed the rest of the day. So then night comes. They had us, it was recommended. I don't think they had to. I don't know what happened the previous night, but for me coming in, it was recommended I do um a special bath where I would take a shower, but I was also, it was recommended to put like flowers together or things that, plants that were on the land that had some type of scent to them, put them all together. They had this kind of oil. I don't remember the name of the oil. It smelled so good. And I'm sure they use it in a lot of ceremonies, in different countries. But they had the oil and you added some water to it. And so after the shower, I was supposed to like rinse with it and just leave it.
Mm.
Like just, dry off. But if like a flower was in my hair, like leave it. Like just
Mm.
don't clean it off. So I show up to ceremony. You're supposed to actually have a lot of like they recommend, there was like a whole list of things that were recommended to bring. I think they said like a torch, which I had no idea what that was when I saw that. I was like, you mean like a stick with like a big flame? Like what am I gonna do with the torch? But I saw this girl and she had like it was like a band with like the flashlight.
Oh
And
wow.
I was like, oh, it's okay. Like I was so not prepared. And like I'm
Mm.
seeing all these things that people brought. Somebody brought a mattress. Like I think she drove or whatever. She
Oh.
brought a mattress. Like people are very comfortable. And I was like, wow, what am I doing? Like, luckily I did bring a blanket with me from home,
Oh
and
wow.
so I brought that. And then somebody let me use a yoga mat and like somebody shared their pillows and stuff. So I was as comfortable as I needed to be. Um, and then I had asked the facilitator because she was like, "Do you have any questions?" And I had no idea. I was kind of walking into this. I feel like I really didn't know what was coming, but then I feel like also very deep inside, I already knew what was coming. And so it was like I didn't have questions. But I did ask her, I said, when I'm provided with the medicine, do I take it like a shot or am I sipping it? Like how do I like, and she was like, no, you're going to take it all. Like when I give it to you, take it all. And I said, okay. So she said she was going to come around to everybody and ask if they wanted 15 or 20. I know that they do this differently in a lot of ceremonies. I think some of them, I think I've heard of like the shaman looking at you and telling you how much you'll take.
Mm.
Some people I think have been able to go up and ask for more or something, you know. But in this particular ceremony I was in, it was 15 or 20. And then I think that night she did start off by saying if they wanted more, that like they could discuss it if they felt like they needed more. So I did find that interesting. For me, I was sitting on my mat and I was like, you know, do I do 15 or 20? I didn't know how strong it was going to be. I didn't even know if like I would be able to stomach it because I've heard of people getting really sick on it. And so I was like, maybe I should like, should I stay on the safe side or should I like go all in? Because I'm kind of late to this. And so I asked for a sign. I said, give me a sign, like let me know. And immediately my friend who was setting up his area, he originally was actually going to be on the other side of the room. And somebody had to switch because they were having back problems and they needed like the wall to support them or
Mm.
something. It was an interesting thing that happened. So then he moved over and he was like, I was in a corner. And so he was like next to me, like diagonal. So we were next to each other pretty much. Um, so he's setting up his stuff and he came over to me and he was like, when she asks you 15 or 20, you tell her 20. Like it was as if like I had asked him and he came over. He was like, you tell her 20. So I was
That's
like,
cool.
okay, got it. Okay, 20. So I'm sitting there and I'm just trying to like meditate a little bit and like kind of release whatever. But again, it's like it's literally starting and I just felt like, you know, am I ready for this? Because I didn't really prepare anything. Like I didn't meditate all week. I didn't like, you know what I mean? I felt like I was like, maybe I should have meditated more. Maybe I should have wrote something down. I didn't. I brought my journal and a pen and nothing was written. And so I'm sitting there and she starts to go around. And just before she comes around, I see her pouring for everybody. I get this like download, or I want to say it was the medicine already speaking to me.
Mm.
And what it told me was, you're going to feel your way through this. And it was like, don't think, just feel. And I was like, okay. And then I was shown like an image of me reaching in a bag for like looking for car keys or something. Like you're moving your hand around. It was like that. So she was like, you're going to feel, you're not going to look, you're just going to feel. So I said, okay.
Is the
So I take
medicine telling you this? This is the medicine telling you
yeah,
this.
I felt like it was the medicine because like as soon as she started pouring it, this is like what I heard internally. Um, and so I was like, okay, to me, it felt like it was coming straight from the medicine.
And you hadn't taken it yet, right?
I hadn't ingested it yet. Yeah. So then it came to me and I take the medicine and immediately like the way I would describe the taste of it, because everybody has that I've told has asked, what does it taste like? To me, it tasted like so like kind of like cold coffee that was left out like that. It like you took a swig of it and then it's like the aftertaste or like that burn you get from taking like a shot of alcohol. It was like this
Mm.
burn and I felt it all in my chest and I was like, whoa. I was like, I hope that I'm gonna be okay. It was like so strong I could feel it going down. It was like a burning. And like I've had cacao before and like it does the heart kind of warming, but this was like a burn and I was
Mm.
like, wow, like this is some strong stuff. And I was like, this is nothing to play with. So I was put the glass down and immediately again the medicine speaking to me. I I want to say it was the medicine. It's telling me that I needed every drop. So I look in my thing and like you can see like, you know, the residue and stuff. And I'm like, this is gonna be so weird, but I'm gonna like everything I felt guided to do in this, I did. It was weird logically, but I did it. And so I licked the inside of the shot glass
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, I was like, I need every drop. Okay. So I took it and I was like, wow. And that even was like, whoa, that was a lot. Like it was burning already. And now I'm going back in to get a little more. Okay. So I'm sitting there and I'm feeling this burn. And my stomach was like gurgling a little bit. And I was like, oh, I hope I don't get sick. And she had meant the facilitator had mentioned, you know, if you feel sick, try to keep it like try to hold on as long as you can, because she would hate for people to like waste it, like you throw it up and
Oh.
well, that's it. I mean, I'm sure they probably would have given people more, but I don't know. Luckily I didn't feel nauseous. I didn't go to the bathroom. I didn't have any of that. Um, but I was sitting there, and this is dark. It's like pretty much pitch black in there. I think maybe there was a candle or two lit, but that was it. So you're in the dark. We're in the jungle, so there's like this rain, and like you can hear like a strong, like there's thunder and lightning, like, and it's under a full moon. I mean, this was like you could feel a lot of like energy already. Um, and so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, like, nothing's happening. And I was like, maybe this is like a bad batch. Like nobody, because I had heard everybody else saying like nothing happened. So I was like, well, I'll just rest. So I like lay back. Yeah. I laid back on my mat because at first I was kind of like in a more meditative position. I was sitting up, and so I laid back, and then maybe about 15 minutes in, that's when it hit me. Now my sense of time might have been all off, but it felt like maybe 15 or 20 minutes in, um, it hit me, and I started getting like psychedelic, very visual type things. And it was like, I'm thinking of like a kaleidoscope, like the shapes and the geometric patterns, like it was all of that. And it was like coming towards me, and it was very amplified. It was intense. At first I thought like, oh wow, like this is cool. And then it just felt overwhelming. Like it was coming at me, and I was like, okay, like I don't want that. And then I started hearing like whispers like on all sides of me. They were speaking another language. Yeah, I mean, the closest thing I know is Spanish, but I know it wasn't Spanish. It was some other dialect, so
Mm.
maybe Mayan, or maybe um the group I was with, I guess maybe I don't know what they call it, the lineage or something. It's Shipibo. So I don't know if it was like that language or something else, but what my brain knows Spanish, like that's the closest I could say. But I was hearing all this whispering in this other language, and for a minute, because of my background as a mental health therapist, I'm immediately thinking, this is psychosis. Like, good job, girl. You're now schizophrenic. Like I was freaking out, and I was like, oh no, I took too much, and like so I'm starting to like panic, and I can feel it like in my chest. I'm like getting all anxious. I'm freaking out. I'm worried about my kids. I'm worried about like who's going to tell my parents. Like all this stuff was coming up, and I was like, oh no, I took too much. I was even almost mad at my friend. I was like, how dare you tell me to take 20? Like, what? This is a mess. I opened my eyes, and I'm like looking at the door, and I'm thinking of running out because I was like, this is it. I'm just gonna go sleep this off. Let me go drink some water and lay down. Like, I don't need to do this.
Mm.
Um, and then the information I got again from the medicine. So most of this throughout my journey, I think, was ayahuasca, the like female energy, the medicine. So I'll refer to it as that. That is mainly what I was hearing and communicating with. I think there were times when maybe there were ancestors or spirit guides, but for the most part, I was connecting more with the medicine. And so she told me, you can run, but I'm already in you, so you're gonna have to ride this
Mm.
out. And I was like, oh my goodness. And for a minute, it seemed daunting to hear, like, I'm already in you. Like, I was like, oh no, there's no way out of this.
Mm.
But then on the other hand, it kind of calmed me down because I was like, you're right. Like, what's that saying? Like, there's no way around. You just got to go through. So I was like,
Mm.
okay. So, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this is what you signed up for. Like, what are you doing trying to run? So I'm still kind of in this panic state though, because I'm hearing all this stuff, I'm seeing all this stuff, I'm uncomfortable, and then I'm hearing like you gotta ride it out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. And I think I remember like heavy breathing, like I was like breathing heavily, and I'm literally panicking. And I hear the word tranquilo, like
Mm.
somebody like yelling this. And so then I immediately just like stopped, and I like tried to breathe. And as I'm trying to calm down, the visuals kind of faded away, the whispering stopped, and then I was connecting more with the medicine.
Mm,
And so then she kind of takes me on this journey. So I saw things from, I want to say, it's hard to distinguish. Now, this is one part where it's a little fuzzy for me. I think it was my time before I was adopted as a child. Like, I feel like there were like little memories or something. But because it's so long ago for me, it doesn't even like it almost didn't feel like mine. Like, so it was an interesting kind of situation. But I know internally on a deep level that those are like memories from before I was adopted.
mm,
So there was some of that. Um, there was like my kids, I saw my kids a lot. Um, Trying to think. There were other like little just snippets of memories coming up. And in some of them, and it was very quick to me, I think the memories, but in one, I think I was given like a different perspective of something. So there was a lot of that going on. And then I think the biggest ones that stand out for me though, one was, and this is where I feel like there were like spirit guides or ancestors and things. So there was a tribe in front of me at one point, and they're handing me a crown, and they're asking me to like put it on my head, and they're calling me La Reina, and I'm taking the crown, but I only got to like right here, and like I could not put it on. And when I couldn't put it on, the like vision disappeared. Like it all just like went away. And so
mm,
then I felt really bad because I felt like, I don't know, I felt like, what would be the word? I felt like I let people down. And then I also, it was so like internal to me to actually visualize, like, you can't even do this for yourself. Like, it was a
oh,
lot coming up. Like, you can't handle your power. Why, like, I think I felt like a fraud. Like, there was
mm,
all these different levels that I was feeling. And I just remember like kind of hunching over and like crying. And so it was a big purge. Like, they give you tissue, and I just had this like massive pile, and I just kept crying, and I was told to like really like purge and blow my nose even as I'm crying, and like I was getting all this stuff out. um and so that was shown, and she's showing me at one point I felt like connected almost to like a tree. I almost felt like I was part of a tree. It was very interesting. It was almost like I don't want to say I was the tree, but I was like in the tree, very connected. And I know I've told you about the show The OA before,
you have. I still
and
haven't seen it. I know it used
I
to
know
be. Yeah, it used to be on net. Maybe I looked for. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but go ahead, go ahead.
check, but there's a piece in it. It's so interesting because, and this is maybe another conversation to have of things that we might project versus the medicine or it being a combination. I mean, there's no way to not have access. I mean, you're being shown memories and things. So there's other things that are going to be put in there. But in the show The OA, in the second season, there's a part where the woman, she finds out that she's a channel. Um, and she has trouble kind of recognizing this for herself. um, but at one point she's in this tree, and the tree is like talking, it's like whispering to her. And she's talking with the tree, and she's actually sitting inside the tree. And so at that moment when I'm experiencing this myself, I was like, part of me was like, oh my gosh, like that show, it was like, showing something similar to this. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, it was just an interesting parallel to see. Because I think even in the show, there's a piece where there's a certain window, and when people get to it, you open the window, and there's like this large light, and some people can't handle what's on the other side of it.
Mm,
And it never really tells you, but you kind of make your own interpretation of it. But I felt like a similar feeling to that when I was sitting in the tree during this trip. I felt like there was some knowledge in here, like in the tree. I was like, some people can't face this. I was like, some people, and so maybe that's also, I don't want to get too much into other people's experiences, but that might also be kind of a barrier where like you want to do it, but maybe at a certain point you stop yourself from the experience. Again, it's like it's too much.
And
Um,
just so people are clear, you weren't actually in a tree, but in the experience you were in a tree.
yeah.
So
So it's very psychedelic. I mean,
no,
you're
no. Well,
like,
for okay,
yeah.
I shouldn't have phrased it that way because to me, you were in the tree, right? If that's what they were showing you, then whatever.
Mm,
To me, you were right. If your spirit, but I digress. So,
yeah.
oh, it's funny, right? When you were mentioning the OA thing, someone popped the fireworks. So I felt very like, okay, it felt very like almost like first the 111, now the firework. I mean, it's like one in the
Yeah.
afternoon, and people are So it was funny
Hmm.
that right when you're talking about that, there was like a
What
confirmation kind of thing. So it was funny. Okay, go ahead,
I
go
think
ahead.
it's interesting because I think a lot of these shows, like there's some shows where they are kind of giving us these like glimpses or these eggshells of like, certain experiences or what reality really is or something. And so that show to me had a lot of like what I'll call like disclosures, like things that is over some people's heads or they think is like, oh, that's fantasy, you know? But me being in that tree, I was like, no, this is real. Like it felt very real. And I was like, that show is like touching on this. And I don't know if they like meant to, sometimes when people create movies and stuff like that, it is downloaded, like something is passing it through you to share with people. And I was like, this is like, it felt so similar. Um, and yes, and then I think while I was in the tree, there was a certain point, I want to say, it's hard to remember now if I don't remember if I like went up or if I was still in the tree and just kind of experienced it in my mind. Um, but there was a moment where I felt like this vastness, almost like I was like in like the galaxies or something, like I was in outer space or what, something. I was not here on the earthly plane. I was elsewhere. And I felt in that moment like I knew everything. I knew everything in that moment. And when I recognized that for myself, I almost wanted to go like searching for like specific things. Like I was like, you know what, while I'm here, let me, like, it was like almost like a library. Like I was like, while I'm here, let me get this information. Let me know the answer to this. And as soon as I started doing that, the medicine like stopped it. And I
Mm,
was like, what? And she was like, if you knew everything, like what would be the purpose or what's the fun in knowing everything?
mm-hmm.
And I was like, you're right.
No,
I was
absolutely.
like, but I
No.
still want to know.
Ah,
But
that's
yeah, it
funny.
was just interesting because in that moment, and like it's such a quick moment, but like when I was in it, it felt like infinity. It just felt like I was like, whoa. And then it just quickly off. But yeah, so there's that experience. And then there was
So,
another moment where um I want to say I'm trying to like go chronologically, but I think after that, she would tell me because like at some points I'm sitting up, at some points I'm laying down, some points like I'm on my side. And I'm on a yoga mat, like on a hard floor. So it's like you're just trying to shift and like find a comfortable position. But
mm,
I felt very much guided. Like she would tell me when to sit up. She would tell me like you can rest now, just don't fall asleep. And so I would listen to her. So like I would get comfortable and she would be kind of giving me these visuals. It's almost like when you're in like a dream state, like I was dreaming, but I wasn't all the way asleep. She's still giving me these visuals, but I'm resting. And then she would tell me like sit up. And I'd be like, okay. And she did not want me going to sleep. Like at one point I was very tired. I was like, I think I've seen enough for today. Like, thank you. She was like, no, like you gotta hang with me, like stay awake. You didn't come all this way to fall asleep. And I was like, okay. So I'm sitting up. Um, and at one point, I opened my eyes. So, for the most part, my eyes are closed throughout this whole journey. But I opened my eyes at different points. And when I opened my eyes, I saw above me, like I said, it's pitch black. I saw stars
mm,
inside. And immediately I'm like, oh, who has a projector? Or like, where's the special effects coming from? And then I remember, girl, you're on a trip. Like, and I'm looking around like, anybody else see the stars? No, okay, just me. And so I was like, well, that's beautiful. And then, she's showing me more. I think there's a lot of like feelings and I'm crying about certain things. And then I open my eyes again and it's like red, like this like red dimensional I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like like lasers, like when they're protecting some type of diamond in a movie and there's all
Mm,
these lasers crossing. It was like that, but it was a very faint red and it almost seemed like there was like geometrical patterns to it. It just felt like another, I want to say like another dimension. Um, and at one point on the right side of me, I saw the room like open up a certain way. It like looked very, I don't know how to describe it. But yeah, it maybe like a portal or something. There was something there. And so I just like recognized that and I was like, oh wow. And then I'm starting to think to myself, I was like, this is like I am really tripping right now. Like there were no visuals. My eyes are open and I'm like, I'm seeing this stuff. I was like, it's not going away. It's like, okay. And the facilitator comes up to me at this point and she's like, it's your turn to go up. And I didn't grasp this concept thinking about it when it started that like everybody would have a turn to go up and sit with, they call her Abuela, the
mm,
shaman. And I had no idea. Like, I don't know why it makes sense. And it made sense when she told me. I was like, obviously. But I was like, I didn't prepare myself for that, I guess. So I'm telling like I feel bad saying this, but I told her I was like, I can't. And she was like, is the medicine strong? And I said, yes. And she was like, okay, well, I'll let Abuela know so she can come help you. And I was like, okay, thank you. And I sit back and she was like, but you still need to come up. And I was like, oh. So I get up and it's almost like I'm drunk or intoxicated, like I'm just trying not to fall. And I get up there and I sit with her and she sings this song in Shipibo. I have no idea what it means. I'm sure I could try to find out what song it was at some point, but she's singing these songs and I mean, this woman is so powerful. She sang for everybody.
mm,
And I think that's really what guides a lot of the journeying is these songs she sings. And so I'm up there and oh, and I'd forgotten to mention too, I had a lot of body shaking. So like I think shortly after when I was being told to calm down and stuff, my body was shaking a lot. And I had to do some research on it afterwards. Um, I think what it was a Kundalini awakening. And I kind of knew it when I was in it, but I wasn't sure. Um, but it was like the energy kind of like moved its way up. Like even at one point my head was like rocking back and forth and I was like this is very uncomfortable. um I don't exactly know the purpose of it, but what the medicine was telling me was two different things. I think one, it was clearing something. um and so there were certain parts like my arm, I remember like it was like twisting at one point and I was like,
mm.
oh my goodness. And then my left leg, it was like jolting back and forth like this. And it was doing this when the facilitator came to get me. And so I was like, I can't get up. I can't walk over there. Um, but the other thing that the medicine told me it was doing was it was like we're shaking you into remembering or something like that. I
Mm.
think that it might have been like my ancestors or something like they it was that was the message. We're trying to shake you into remembrance. And I was like, okay. But when I went up to the shaman, I'm sitting there in front of her and I'm still shaking and I'm trying to like calm it down. And so she, I won't go into exactly what she does because I don't know if that's like sacred. But she does a lot of like energy clearing in her own way, and there's certain things that she uses to help. And it helped immensely. Like the shakes stopped after she did what she did and with her song. I did a lot of crying while I was up there. But after her song ended, my shakes stopped. So I went back to my spot, and I laid down because I was told I could rest then. So I rested for a minute on my side, and at that point, I was being shown that, I mean, the message I was getting was a lot about leadership. Um, but then what I was shown were images of me doing similar things to what the shaman and the facilitator were doing. And so when I got those images, I was immediately like, oh no, no, like you got the wrong person. Like that sounds really great. I admire what they do. I am like, I love it, but that's, I can't do that. And the medicine was telling me you can and you will.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, but like, I had all these questions and I was like, how, in what way am I supposed to heal? And, what, like, why me of all people would I call myself something when this woman is so powerful in front of me? Like that's not me. And so that it was like a recurring kind of like theme there of like not being able to put the crown on, not seeing myself as powerful as this other woman in front of me. And then I even like I want to say I almost was like bargaining or making excuses. And I was like, I have kids, like I can't live a double life here, right? Like sounds nice, but again, you have the wrong person. I was like, maybe you meant to channel somebody else in here. Like that's not me. But the message I got for that was that I was shown images like flashbacks of me with patients of mine, of different moments. It wasn't always necessarily like a positive or like they had their aha moment or something. It was a lot of different, like flashes of different patients that I was with. And so she was like, you're already healing and then you're already leading. And she showed me like me walking down a street and my two kids behind me.
Mm.
So she was like, so you're already doing these things, you're just going to shift or it's going to expand in some way. And so that I remember just like breaking down crying and like I was like this like it just didn't I mean I was very grateful and thankful, but I was just like, are you sure? Like somebody else could do it, you know? And I even still like I'm tearful about it now, but like I was like, I don't know if that's me. Um, but she was just showing me like I can do both. Like I kept getting that message, like you can do both. And like she was showing me other things that I've done like in my life where like a lot of people don't like typically mix this and that. She's like, but you do it. So like you like why limit yourself basically? Like you can do both. And I thought it was interesting too, just like a little kind of side note, the fact that I was staying in the same quarters as the abuela, she after the ceremony she was on the phone with her grandkids. And so like for me I don't know why I have this idea of like shamans and like these indigenous healers that they don't have, I don't want to say they don't have family, but for some reason I feel like they almost, they it's almost like a priest, like you choose this calling and so maybe you don't have children or you don't have a certain type of responsibility in terms of like lineage or something. I don't know why I've had that concept in my mind. And so it was such an interesting thing to see that of like she has kids, she has grandkids, and she's out here right now doing this work. And so it like confirmed again, like you can do it. Like you have kids, but that doesn't mean you can't do this too. So it was just an interesting kind of thing. But yeah, she was showing me all this and I felt very like heavy as if like, this is a huge calling and like, I don't know. Uh, but I think she was like playful at some points of like, like I'm not asking you, like I'm telling you, like this is you and you're already doing it. So I was like, okay. And I kept wanting to know more as to like in what ways do I heal or is there some type of training or information I need? And it was just I was met with like laughter, like pretty much like don't plan, like you don't need to know now. It'll come to you. Um and she told me like just how you knew to come out here and hop on the plane, like you'll know when it's time to move. And I was like, okay. So there was that piece. She did address some relationship stuff for me. I won't necessarily go into all of that, but she did. So I did get answers to that. And that was kind of like a light intention I had just before the ceremony started, because the facilitator asked me, what would I like Abuela to sing to? And I
Mm,
didn't understand the question at first. And I was like, what does that mean? And she was like, is there something you're carrying that you want her to address or sing to and find healing with? And so I was on the spot. I had no plan. And so I just said, relationship patterns, staying in things longer than I should. And so I was shown relationships and kind of how to work with them now. I think one piece I found interesting was there's one relationship where I feel like it's not really fully settled. And for whatever reason, I've always viewed this person as like the villain or like this toxic person. And she was basically telling me, like, to stop looking at him as the villain.
mm,
And if I'm ever going to find peace and let the things settle, that I have to shift my perspective of that. And so that's something I've been working with like now, like in this week and stuff, of like really addressing of like, whoa, like all this time when I thought somebody was toxic, there's some things I was doing. There's like the co-toxicity. There's like, so I was like, it's not just one-sided, and I've had to like take responsibility and things like that. But yeah, so it's interesting she mentioned that. There was another thing she showed me and that played out. So there was a lot of stuff where I didn't really fully come with a specific thing, but she showed me, and things did happen the way she showed me. Um, and then I will say, so there was like a final piece I'll mention. These are kind of just like highlights of it. I mean, this is a whole like hours journey.
absolutely.
Um, but when I was up with the abuela and she's singing, there was a tribe behind me that approached, and they were whispering and they were saying she's ready and things like that, and they got this bag together and they put it on my back, and I felt very like humbled and like honored to receive it. But then a part of me was also like, but what is this for? Like, what is this journey that I need this backpack? Because this seems like pretty intense. It was
Mm,
almost like you're gonna need this. Like for where you're going, you're gonna need this. But I've since looked that up because I was just so curious about, like, I kept getting a lot of like tribal things, and so I was like, maybe in a past life, these things were happening. And so I looked up, the significance of a tribe placing a bag on someone or handing a bag to someone. And it was typically somebody in leadership, which again was that theme of like being a leader. Um, and the what kept coming up for me was like a medicine bag. And so it kind of also aligned with the idea of her suggesting that I would be healing in some way and maybe differently than the way I'm doing these days now. And so I thought that was interesting. Um, and then the final piece that I also think is like really beautiful is, we were nearing the end of the journey and I could feel it because like the medicine starts to like feel a little softer in the body. And so I knew we were almost at the end. And she, I think I was like asking her, like, how will I know? Or like, what if I feel lost? Or like, what do I do? And she said that she showed me an image of a flute, and it was like a wooden, like a native looking flute with some like blue on it. And she said that if I ever feel lost, to play the flute, and whatever came out would be the answer. And
mm,
so I was like, okay. So yeah, so that was the bulk of my journey. And then afterwards, as the medicine was like calming down and we're nearing the end, I just remember feeling like I was like more grounded in my body. Like I felt like I had gone somewhere and like now I'm back. And I just remember like holding my body and like being like, oh my gosh, like I'm home, I'm back. And I remember telling you that like I love things like dreams and meditations and things where it feels like we're outside of ourselves. And it was so interesting to be outside of myself in a sense. and then like be so grateful and happy to be back in this body that sometimes feels so dense or like restrictive in some way. But I was like so grateful, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're back. So I was shocked at how happy I was to be back in my body. But yeah, so that was the journey. There were other people next to me. I think, at some points I would hear some other things that were going on. So everybody had kind of like a mix of an experience. And the next day it was interesting to, because none of us talked about it that night, but we were all, everybody's exhausted at that point and like processing like what happened. And I'm thinking at that point that everybody had what I had, in their own way. And I'm trying to respect people's space and like not bombard them. And I'm just like, whoa. So I go lay down, I get rest. And the next day, I was, kind of jokingly, I was like, whoa, like, wow, like last night, um, and the person I was meeting with that morning, the first person I saw, he was just like, I didn't get anything.
Mm,
And I was like, nothing. And he was like, yeah. And so when I reviewed my experience, it like, I think a lot of people, I think, were shocked. They were just like, that did not happen for me.
mm,
There was one other person who mentioned seeing the stars. I want to say we saw probably the same stars, which I thought was interesting. But even he said that was his only visual, and but for him, he acknowledged that he got distracted in somebody else's experience, and he feels like that kind of knocked it off. But I do think it's interesting that, yeah, so going back to when that woman who was only there for the first ceremony, she was not there for the second. She felt like I was, given something or in at an advantage, and she mentioned wishing that she had had that. Like, but looking back on it, the same people who were there the previous night heard what I heard, did it again, and still didn't receive what they thought they would. So I don't know.
no, thank you so much for sharing. That's very detailed. No, no, I love that you're able to share it so detailed, right? Like and it's interesting because I could see your like therapist mind being able to analyze it as you're going through it. So that's why that's beautiful that you were able to have that and share it. So since you had that experience, do you feel anything has changed? Like how you said you were grateful to be back in your body, but what has did that shift of perspective, is it sticking with you, or how do you feel? Like what are the things that you notice change within you from that?
Yeah, there's a few things actually. So, one, I did have a relationship end, and I was shown that it would end. And so I remember thinking like, oh, that wouldn't happen or whatever. But when it happened in real life, I feel like I was almost able to process it a lot differently rather than trying to hang on and repeat some previous like toxic patterns of mine. I was able to just be like, this is the way it is, like, let it go.
Mm,
And I'm still processing it. It's not like it's not affecting me, but I'm not doing those self-sabotaging things that would keep me locked in a pattern to just do and do again. And so I think that's been one crucial thing, because that is the one thing I didn't think I didn't plan for it, but that's what I asked for, was help with staying in things too long, help with breaking these patterns that I have. And so far that has happened. And it's not that I won't make mistakes again. I know I will, but at least for this one thing, it almost definitely feels like a cycle was broken, and that I've got to like, kind of maintain that in some way, keep that awareness to keep doing that. Um, so that piece, another, I felt like way, I still have the effects of it, but I know when I first returned, I felt my connections, I felt so deep in them.
mm,
Like when I was talking to people, I just could feel like, I guess, the energy between the, if we could see I don't know, our relationships on like a frequency level or something. Like I could sense it. And so it felt like I was more grateful for the people in my life because as I'm speaking to them, even if it was a very generic or basic conversation, like it just I felt more deep in it. And even with my kids, I just felt like our connecting was a lot, it was on a deeper level. Like I didn't know it could go deeper, and it just feels like it's deeper. Um, with my kid's dad, even like I think there's been times again with I guess the practice of not seeing him a certain way, things have felt easier. So that's another thing, and that was something she had told me, like, stop, you know, making him out to be the villain.
Um,
And so that was a big like one, like, are you sure? Are we sure about this? But I can feel it, like it's yeah, it's all energetic. And then I would say too, on another level, um, I've had like what is it? Like body image, like self-conscious stuff after pregnancies and stuff. And I've noticed lately, like when I post my videos, there's been times like in the past where I would go, I can't believe I'm gonna admit this, but I'm gonna admit it. I've gone I've gone like on CapCut or something, and like you can do like a body like you shift the body a little bit, and I would just do it slightly because I was like, I mean, if I go this far, I don't have an hourglass figure. People are gonna be like, that's so Photoshop. But I would do it a little bit, or I would use some type of filter so that people were more distracted with the filter than like looking at my stomach or something. Or I would crop it, like, okay, I'm dancing over here, but I'm going to crop the bottom so you only see me from like up here or something like that. Well, now I've been posting stuff and I'll see my stomach and I'll be like, oh my God. But I've just left it. I'm not, yeah. And there was a piece in the journey that I forgot to mention about my stomach. And she like specifically was talking about it and like telling me to like, you know, give it more love and attention as if I was pregnant. Like she
mm,
was saying, like, you are pregnant, you are carrying something, um, something is going to be birthed. And so to treat my body as if I am carrying. And so I think that's also like, I haven't been thinking of it that way, but I think it's like in me to like, so I'm just like, I'm not going to worry about it. Cause it's like, yeah, if I was 3 months pregnant, I'm not going to crop. You know what I mean? I'm pregnant. Why would I hide it? So it's kind of been like that of like, well, it is what it is. But I would say those are some of the main points. And definitely trusting, surrendering a lot more because I feel like I've been through, I mean, when I was in that whole process, I mean, it's so intense emotionally, at least from my personal experience, was so intense. I felt a lot of like tension and release and tension and release. It was like this, like a lot of like contraction. Um, and so I feel like now that I've been through that, some other things as they come up, I'm like, this is nothing. Like you have no idea the battle I was in. And it's just, yeah. So I think it's helped a lot more with like trusting and just following the next steps and not needing to know all the answers.
absolutely, absolutely. Not having to know, but it's funny because this book, I'm almost done with it. I think in like 20 something hours the audiobook, and I probably have like 4 hours left of
Hmm.
this audiobook. But it's a guy that's very known, Graham, wait, what's his name? Graham
Mm-hmm.
Hancock, something like that. Um, what do you call it? And thanks to Adrian, if he's watching this, he's the one that gave me the audiobook.
Yeah.
And you know, like there's parts, and like how he said he's heard it over and over, but that book starts off, I think pretty much the whole book is about that man's experience with not just ayahuasca, but the other plant medicines too, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Or other, other, I don't know if he mentions mushrooms too. It's a lot. Like he even, Adrian, the one that gave it to me, he also said he's heard it over and over and over. So I think I'm gonna have to hear it over because it is trying to explain these things in a Western way, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful because I get people need to understand it. For me, like I don't need. that all that. Like for me, when I experience things, I get it. It's like I experienced it, I process it, and it's cool. I don't
Mm.
need to know everything, right? Like I'm good with it.
Yeah.
I don't overanalyze it to say, wow, because I think even that in that book, he's trying to explain to those that say it's an hallucination or this and that, but yet, how does
Mm.
that explain this or how does that explain that? And he goes into it. That's one thing I wanted to bring up with you for sure about the DNA. I feel strongly because he touches on that. There's like, I know more than a whole chapter on DNA, or he brings it up again, but
Mm.
it's like, I do feel because, I kind of had a similar experience with like peyote, like I went
Mm.
to a ceremony, but they told me not like, I heard it. It was like, you don't need it.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, wow. Like, and I didn't even know it was a peyote. I drove hours, everything just boom. It felt so divinely orchestrated, right?
Mm.
And I took a little bit, very little, and I still had like, a vision and everything, right?
Yeah.
And so I came back to it. Years later, I was invited to another ceremony and the same. There ended up being peyote, and when I took it, it was like, I had anxiety and it disappeared like after taking it for over a year. I couldn't get rid of, going to the doctors, nothing. I couldn't get rid of anxiety for nothing. And then when I
Yeah.
did this the peyote, it was like, yeah, the anxiety disappeared. It was, and it felt like that. It felt like this warm embrace, like something telling me like, oh, where have you been? Like, oh, we missed you, kind of thing, right?
Mm.
So did you feel that way? Because like you said, even before you started, you were already having like, oh, this feels familiar, right? So do you feel it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that like it was something in your DNA that
It's interesting you say that because somebody, when I was kind of sharing a little bit about it the following morning before we even went to the integration circle, this person was like, I think you and her were already connected,
mm,
and she's like, and he was like, and that's why like you went right into it, like, and then some people, when they found out that I was born in Guatemala and that I had been adopted, they were like, oh, it's already in you. Um, and that was also another kind of like download I got while I was in the journey, was like, it's in you. And that, despite being adopted, it was like, this is in you. Like, you just, that was that sense I got of like, we're shaking you into remembering that, like, this is in you, this is a part of you. It was almost like, I'm trying to think of like something like, goodness, like something like, I'm for some reason I'm getting like an image, but I don't know how to describe it, of like, a snow globe or something where it's like all shaking and then it's got to settle. It was
mm,
like they were shaking it and they were like, but we need it to settle this way. Like, you've had it over
mm,
here. Now we need the snow on this side. So it was like that. That's the feeling I got, was like they were shaking me into remembering. And I do feel on some level, like intuitively, that through that experience, something else is like waking up. I can't like identify it. Like if somebody were to ask me, oh, what's waking up? I don't know. But there's something there. Um, and I think a lot of it does have to do with the kind of intuitive piece where I've kind of stifled it, or I've like kind of dismissed it a lot. Um, Even the next day when I was sharing my experience, my friend who had invited me, called me a channel, and he was like, well, she's a channel.
mm,
And because when I described, the medicine had already told me something before I started, and they were like, whoa. And he was like, well, she's a channel. And when he said that, and like I felt them looking at me, which they didn't mean any harm, I'm sure, but for some reason I took it so like personal, and I was just like, well, it comes and goes. And for some reason, I guess I know I've shared with you, for some reason I felt like if I shared that piece of myself, that people would, need me to do it like on demand. Like, oh, well, then tell me about this. Or like, oh, if you are intuitive, you are psychic, then like you should already know what's coming. Like, why are you even making mistakes? But I've learned, and I've sat with this myself kind of about it, of like, well, what does this mean for me? Or like, what is the purpose in it? And what I received was, it's to be able to see things from multiple perspectives. So it's like different vantage points. Like you're going to see it before it comes. Now you're going to see it while you're in it. And then you're going to look back on it and be like, oh, wow, I see it all. Okay. So, yeah, so that's just what I've been picking up on. And it feels like very like complex, but you wouldn't be given the gift if you couldn't handle it or something. So I'm practicing kind of coming more into that. And I feel like too that it also is linked to that medicine bag that I received. And when I Googled, like what's typically in a medicine bag or why somebody would receive one or what's, the purpose behind it. And something I had read, I think did say that when you receive the medicine bag, that that's when like your spiritual gifts are like I don't remember what the wording was, like maybe it's time for you to present your spiritual gifts or like they're more empowered or like they're maybe more activated or something. And so that is something that I'm starting to feel now where I'm being guided to lean more on the intuition, use it a bit more. um I want to say almost like as practice,
Mm,
like work with it. It's not for any like goal necessarily right now. It's just like work with it. See how you can maybe call it in more intentionally. Not because somebody's like, "Oh, tell me now," but just because like I feel like it's time to tap in.
mm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, eventually everything connects. Like experiences I had from like all of a sudden don't make sense now, right? I know there was something I was processing the other day about certain things that happen to me now, and I was like, wow, why didn't, but I guess I wasn't meant to know it then, I guess.
Mhm.
Well, there's a
Yeah.
part of me that thinks, but see, I know now. See, like that's probably in a way kind of what you were showing. Like, everything happens when it's supposed to happen, but there's a part of me that thinks like, oh, did I reject it before? And so this time around, I'm not gonna reject it, right? Like that's a huge part of
Mhm.
like, go ahead, you
Yeah,
were
I
gonna
think
say
that's where
something?
that
Oh,
surrender is. Yeah.
yeah,
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 that's hard, but yeah. Mhm.
absolutely. And I wanted to talk about that because, see, like the medicine bag, how you said that they gave it to you. My very first episode, that's, the medicine woman, Trish, that I interviewed, she said that, right? Since she said it in the interview, I could share it, right? But it was
Mhm.
like how she said that it kept coming to her. Her grandma that had raised her in that way, started after she passed away, kept appearing to her in a vision, trying to give her the medicine bag. But she didn't want to take it.
Mhm.
Because I
Mm.
guess she was at that point she was a cheerleader in this, and she wanted to like,
Yeah.
live her best life or whatever. And wow,
Yes.
in the sense of this world, right? Like,
Hmm.
she wanted to have fun, and at
Yeah.
one point she finally, like, her grandma kept coming to her, in the visions, and
Mhm.
finally gave her, she finally took the medicine bag. You know what I mean? So it is representative of, it is a responsibility. Like, I get that part
Yes.
of even my spiritual walk. I'm grateful that I was around that enough. Um, I had that before. I had an elder. I went to a ceremony and I was in there with him, and we were just preparing. We weren't having the ceremony yet, but we were preparing that day, right? Like throughout the whole day until we had the ceremony in, like, as the sun was setting. But at one point he looked at me too, and he's all, you know why everyone's over there and you're in here with me? And then I was like, why? And then he's all, I know. He's all, I know. You know? And I was like, wow. But he was trying to tell me, like,
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
like he's not gonna tell me because I was like, why? And then,
Yeah.
I know. He's all, I know why. So you shared something that reminded me of that. You had
Mhm.
one of the things that happened to you, right? That there was something you said that reminded me, that triggered that memory. I was like, oh wow. And
Mhm.
even when you shared about how when they told you you can and you will, I felt this huge emotion. It almost felt like my eyes were gonna water. Like when you said that, I was like, oh wow, I felt, see, right now I'm getting chills just saying that. I felt
Mhm.
that exact moment, like when they told you that. And that's very like the spirit world, right? That's very like well, obviously in this case it was the medicine speaking to you, right? The ayahuasca
Hmm.
telling you you can and
Yeah.
you will.
Yes.
I love
Yeah,
it
it just
'cause
felt like such a, like you used the right word, responsibility. Like I was like, are you sure? Like, what if, like there's just so many what ifs with it. But yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so, I want to make sure I talk about this because I went down the rabbit hole, and it's funny that you were like, "Oh, I'm ready to talk about this," because I had asked you if you wanted to talk
Mhm.
about your journey. I don't really like calling it, I always like before, right? I was always brought up to not use the word experience, right? Because that's how it would be like in ceremony. Everybody would just want to experience it as opposed to, I like the word journey better. So we'll say like in this case, right? Like journey. Not
Mhm.
that it's wrong that you said experience. It's fine that you said it. I'm just like when you were going through your journey, like I went down the rabbit hole because just the other day on TV they happened to show that they were trying to blame like, oh, this I think this Ukrainian guy killed a Russian woman, and they said that they had been doing ayahuasca, that they had gone. And so I went down the rabbit hole, and there's been so many. I had no idea. There was even one where I guess someone went. But see, in one case, I know they said, oh, they found like a glass pipe on. So I don't know if people were,
Yeah.
but it always seems like in some case someone was abusing the medicine, right? And
Mhm.
not just that, because I think there was someone even in Florida that they were like 30 something, this artist, and they were doing ayahuasca with this I guess an elder that was the same, like 80 years old or something. And that guy, or they had both agreed or something that he had something in him, right? Like a parasite, some kind of
Mm.
entity was attached to him. And at
Wow.
some point, I guess the 30 something year old starts stabbing the 80-year-old, like, medicine man, shaman, what, or healer. I forgot
Mm.
how he called himself, right? And he ran like to get help and this and that. And I was just blown away because I don't even know why I'm bringing this up, right? I guess that. I guess maybe that to bring caution, like don't do it if you're just like I think it's a beautiful way of when it calls to you, right? Because then there's no
Mhm.
mistake. There's no mistake
Yeah.
about because I think sometimes, yeah, when people abuse it, like the medicine,
Mhm.
yeah, or there's things that come in, right? That
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't really know where I was going with that, but I just wanted to bring that caution. Like, don't do it if
Mhm.
it's not just
Yeah.
for let me have a trip, right? Like let me just
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you didn't experience that where you were at, right? Like nobody was kind of losing their mind or nothing like that, like anything negative, right?
No.
So
Somebody did have something go on. This was like the distraction that happened. I
oh, okay.
think the guy,
You
I'm
don't
not
have to
really sure
share
what happened.
specifics. Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah, but he got up, and he left. And then I
oh,
think the
okay.
facilitator had to go out and check on him.
Mm,
But I think what my friend who is involved with the group said was that he was kind of in his own experience, and so it might
oh,
have
okay.
been like almost when I saw that portal, like maybe something he felt like he was being called to something, like with the perception, the changes in perception. You might actually go follow something. I don't know if it was
Mm,
vivid enough, right? Like, I don't know if there was like a bunny hopping and you're like, oh, wait, come back. And you go follow it. I don't know. So I think he had something like that where something visual was there and he kind of, instead of staying put, he went somewhere. And so
absolutely.
they had to kind of bring him back. They were like, hold on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no. I kind of wanted just so what was it? Like, okay. I wanted to read one of the ones because I know one person said that they saw the other person as a demon, and then oh, right here, look at during the hearing, the man confessed he stated that he was under the influence of drugs at the time of the murder. He allegedly ingested hallucinogenic mushrooms and ayahuasca. See, so maybe that was
Oh,
see at
mixed. Yeah.
that point, they're
Hmm.
mixing stuff, this and that, and the victim was possessed by a demon, and he just wanted to save her soul. So that's why he started. I guess he
Oh,
stabbed the
no.
the woman, right? So during his trip, right? But maybe that was part of it, right? See, then it becomes just a, oh, I'm just trying to have this trip, so taking ayahuasca. I'm gonna make some mushrooms in there too. These kind of things, right? So I think, because even in the beginning when you said like, you had been invited to one, but it seemed a little different, more like, So I'm glad you went to the one you went to because it seems like
Mhm.
that one was, like pure in other words. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but or those that have
Yeah.
knowledge of it. Yeah, better. That's
And
the
there's different, they do preface in the information they gave us that there's different, like I think they called it lineages of like how they're trained in it or what, maybe even how the medicine is made. I don't know. Um, so maybe that's also it too, is, when you're talking about the DNA piece, maybe that is why this worked out and it like there was really no thought behind it. It just kind of happened. It like did it on its own in a way. Um, and with the other, maybe that just wasn't, so maybe for some people that's for them, but the other thing too I'll say is with this group it was like more intimate, so I want to say there were maybe
oh.
like maybe 12 or 14 of us in the room. Um but for the other group that I was interested in going with at first, I mean, I think there would have been hundreds,
Mm.
and so I can't even imagine like that when you talk about distraction, like
Oh wow.
yeah, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of, especially if people are purging. Because I did hear some people like spitting things up, and so imagine, and I did hear some people leaving to go to the bathroom. So imagine with like hundreds of people and you're hearing this back and forth, or like you're hearing the purging and you're trying to focus on your own stuff. Like I can't imagine. Yeah.
Mm. Absolutely. No, and so I think this will be good for those that are thinking about it or being called to better, right? Being
Yeah.
called to listen to, and maybe they'll have a better understanding of it. And also like the book I mentioned, I think also has like, it's pretty much all about that, right? So if they want to look that up, it's called Visionary by Graham Hancock, right? Graham, how do you say it? Graham, right? Graham
I think so,
Hancock,
Graham.
right? Yeah, yeah, Visionary. So that's the book, if anyone, and the whole book is about that. And I think, I like it because he tries to break it down more scientifically.
Mm,
But I think it's more about that, trying to prove to people like how it's not just hallucinations, right? Like people
right.
that need, I
I mean,
guess.
there's things in it, like even when I'm the bag and I'm looking up like what would that be for? And historically there's information on, you know what I mean? Like how could I access that if it was just a hallucination? Like we are somewhere, It's like I've never in this lifetime looked up that information or had knowledge of a medicine bag. I'm not part of any tribes right now, so like where would I have accessed that information, or like to even come up with a tribe behind me handing me a bag and the significance of that. So I don't know. You know what I mean?
No, no, absolutely. And even like that, like in that visionary thing, he talks about how, what better way to store information than like the DNA, right? It's almost like it already has a library in that. Oh, and he goes on about the junk DNA thing, and that blows my mind that in this society, any scientist would have the audacity to call something that we have inside of us junk DNA. Like
Mm,
if the like human body isn't already the most fascinating thing, that the way we function, right? Everything about a human being, right? From our eyes to nose to mouth to, the way we ingest food, and it gives us energy, and the, reproduction, right? Everything about humans, to say that we have a thing junk DNA inside of us, right? Like, and I think
hmm
maybe if anything, that's probably where all that is stored, of that extra information, right? The spiritual part, right? Where because they don't know how to access it, it's called junk DNA, right? And that probably
mm,
holds all the memories, right? The ancestral memories. That's why even that, right? So many indigenous people, or even when we're not aware of it, even before I started going to native ceremonies and everything, I already had an acknowledgement of ancestors, right? We always give respect, even those that are religious tend to, like Dia de los Muertos, right? The
Mhm.
tradition of honoring your ancestors, right? Because we know there's something more to it, right? Like our ancestors, we're carrying on something from them in our DNAs, and that's why, obviously, right? Diseases get passed in your DNA, even, right? Like you have,
Mhm.
you gotta watch out for diabetes. You gotta do this because it was in,
Yeah.
a parent's
Mhm.
DNA, right? Your eyes, right? You pass that, the color of your eyes gets passed in DNA. So how is it possible to not even consider that all this stuff is being passed through the DNA, right? But he goes into it. I like how, I'm not big on the whole scholarly approach to explaining things,
Mhm.
right? Like I'm a
Mhm.
lot more just
Yep.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
the short versions of it, right? Like yeah. So, but thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with relating to this or?
I don't think so. I think that's it. But I'm glad I'm able to share a positive experience because I know that some people, like I said, some people didn't see anything. I think sometimes too, some people have things triggered and maybe they don't know what to do with it. So definitely making sure that there's like some type of integration at the end, or you are able to keep in touch with a facilitator or somebody just to kind of guide you after. I think that that's important too.
Well, let me ask you this: for those that are on that journey where they feel like, oh, I want to have this life altering experience, do you feel like
Mhm.
that's because obviously, right? Even that getting a medicine bag, like I know the significance of that. So to me, it is a big thing, right? Or even you being handed a crown and you not wanting to take it, right?
Mhm.
Do you feel like your life has been shifted in a whole another direction because of it? For those that, I mean, I know not everyone's gonna have that experience, as you even said, like not everybody had this life altering experience. But
Mhm.
for you that you did have that, do you feel it's a life altering thing? Like, was your life? Do you feel like now you're thinking about things differently, or?
Yeah, I think I want to say like a seed was probably planted previous to it, and now I can kind of feel like the effects of I'll say the ceremony was probably more of like watering more of the seed, and so it feels like it's thriving more. I know that's a kind of a weird metaphor to use, but I that's how I feel. I don't feel like the ceremony was it, and that's why all of this is happening. I think there were other things that you know, transpired beforehand. Like I said, even the dance class that might seem so random, like if I hadn't done that, would I have, gone to the ceremony? Like there's all these little things that I feel like something was planted and I was almost being asked to practice, like listening to that kind of gut response and follow it to get to that point of like, okay, now you are ready. Like you've been listening, so here now listen to this. And so I do think it was already something was already kind of there. This helped kind of confirm it more. And so now I'm able to kind of trust more. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, no, thank you so much. I won't keep babbling on because I think you shared a lot of information for people to digest, right? And I had already interviewed someone that had a very different experience from the one you had. And
Mhm.
they also had an experience, right? So I interviewed them. I'll put a link to it too so people could see because I think it's interesting, what a different experience, right? And
Yeah.
for people to understand that, yeah, everyone's gonna have. But for me, ultimately, I feel that the medicine is never gonna lie, right?
Mhm.
The medicine is never gonna lie. So at that moment, you were shown what you were meant to see, what you were ready to see, as opposed to like like people that didn't have that experience. I really feel wasn't meant for them to have. Maybe not yet, maybe not ever, right? There's certain things that aren't
Yeah.
meant for certain people, right? And
I
that's
will
why.
say, the facilitator, I think this is okay to share because it's not, I think it's a kind of a side note type thing, but she did mention during the circle when people were expressing disappointment, she said the medicine is going to meet you where you're at, not where you want to be, but where you're at. And so I think that that's an important piece too. Um, what I gathered from that too is that maybe it's not best to come in moments of like desperation or crisis. Like this is not like, oh, this is my last resort. Like I have to get the answer here. Because I think in that point, you're already like, you're almost like strangling this energy that's like, what's it going to give you?
Mm,
You know? Yeah.
absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Okay, no, thank you so much. If anyone has questions, obviously put them in the comments, this and that. I'll put links to the other interviews we did and to the other ayahuasca interview I did. I'll put them all, in the description and all that good stuff. Thank you so much, Debbie.
Yeah. Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Okay.
Life may move fast or it may move slow. I met a silly man who said he make it slow. We look up out towards space or even at the sky. One day pass away but never look inside. Breathe in, breathe out. Life is a maze but we'll figure this out. I mean human beings, I ain't got no doubt.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sometimes you just feeling it, you know what I'm saying? You just feeling it. And I wanna feel this way forever, forever.